Around 14,000 ships transit the Panama Canal annually, but the U.S. uses it more than any other nation, with 40% of all U.S. container traffic, valued at $270 billion, traveling through the 50-mile stretch of water each year. Where has this vessel come from?
Probably from Asia. It's a container ship. It's one of the biggest ones that come through.
How much of these containers are bound for the United States?
Probably all of them.
But tensions in Panama are rising.
Behind me is the port of Balboa, and it has become a lightning rod of controversy for both China and the United States.
The U.S. claims China has influence and control over the canal, and that threat represents a violation of the treaty between the U.S. and Panama, a claim China denies.
To further enhance our national security, my administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it.
In March, an investment group led by U.S. firm BlackRock announced it was trying to purchase 2 ports at either end of the canal, as well as about 40 others from Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison. The outcome of that deal remains unclear. But it's the U.S.-China trade war that could have the biggest impact on the Panama Canal's bottom line. How would a recession with the United States impact the Panama Canal?
Since close to 75% of our cargo goes to or from the United States, any recession worldwide or the United States will impact somehow the Panama Canal. That's for sure.
The canal is facing other challenges too. A recent drought meant the number of vessels transiting the canal in fiscal year 2024 plummeted, with some goods forced to move by train. And Panamanian pilots and crew have the challenging task of moving some of the world's largest ships through one of its narrowest waterways.
A lot of people ask me, like, well, what's your job? And to say it simply, our job is to do controlled collisions.
To better understand the issues facing the Panama Canal, CNBC boarded a tugboat to get a behind-the-scenes look at the challenges it faces. Completed in 1914, the Panama Canal was built by the U.S. after a failed attempt by the French. It cost about $370 million, equivalent to about $15 billion today. President Carter signed the 1977 treaty with Panama, creating a framework for the handover. It was turned over in 1999. Today, about 6% of global trade goes through the Panama Canal. Ariel Castillo is the head of tugboat operations. His crew's job is to escort a bulk carrier named the Panda on her way from Vancouver to Gibraltar.
The people that are on the vessel, are they crew members of the vessel or are they part of the Panama Canal Authority?
They are part of our company and they do a very important job here. They are in charge of connecting every tugboat and every locomotive to the transiting ships.
What is this tugboat going to be doing?
He's relieving us. We are moving to the alpha position on the bow of the ship.
Before entering the waterway, each tugboat is manned by a Panamanian pilot. Navigating the canal is not something a ship's captain can do on their own.
The pilot, he's coming on board. You can see climbing on the pilot ladder.
The Panama Canal pilot takes control of the vessel, so we are sure that someone with experience navigates through the Panama Canal waters.
On any given day, these pilots face a range of issues. A large commercial ship like this one can require as many as 4 tugs to navigate the canal's confined spaces. The canal routinely handles ships holding 17,000 containers. And the canal makes hefty profits from those services, some mandatory like piloting, tugs, and reservations, which made up a third of 2024 revenue. To navigate the sometimes challenging waterway, pilots need to stay in constant contact with the control tower and each other.
This tugboat is assisting the ship on the stern. He's like a brake. Nowadays we have the communications on the radio, but that's the sound of a whistle.
That's 3. What does that mean?
That means 3 whistles back. Now he's pulling back the ship in order to brake, in order to stop the ship.
What's the biggest challenge that you face on the water?
The biggest challenge here is the wind. A large vessel can be moved by the wind.
Container ships have roughly doubled in size since the 1950s, and the high stacks of containers can act as a sail in strong gusts. But lifting ships up to get across the canal is arguably an even bigger task. Gatun Lake, a man-made lake created in large part by the U.S. in the early 1900s, sits 85 feet above sea level. Ships need to cross that lake to get to the other side. The Panama Canal uses a system of 12 locks arranged in sets of 3, which act as a water elevator to raise and lower ships.
What is directly in front of us right here?
Directly in front of us is the gate of the lower chamber of the Cocoli locks.
We let water go in, and as soon as this one is lowering, the other one is going up. We will lift the ship close to 27 feet, till a point where they are both equalized. At that point, we can open the gates between them and let the ship pass from one side to the other.
Each vessel passing through the canal uses 52 million gallons of fresh water from Gatun Lake.
Why does the water have to rise? Why can't you just traverse at the current water level?
Because there are mountains here in the Panama Canal, so we have to rise up the vessels so they can be to the level of the Gatun Lake.
We use about 2.5 times the amount of water a city of the size of New York uses every single day.
These locks are part of the 2017 Neo-Panamax locks expansion at the Pacific side of the canal, the largest infrastructure project since the canal's opening. The expansion cost about $5.2 billion and was paid for by Panama. The new Neo-Panamax locks are 70 feet wider and 18 feet deeper than the original Panamax locks, allowing bigger ships to pass. Panamax lanes do not have the water recapturing ability of the Neo-Panamax locks.
No problem. Tell me what you want. Toe to the wall. I have to be very careful because he's got mooring lines in the water, and I don't want to get those lines in my units.
It takes about 12 hours for a vessel to traverse the Panama Canal versus 21 days to sail around the tip of South America. About 35 vessels transit the canal each day, and about 8,700 people work there.
In terms of the amount of trade that has increased over the years, from your time to now, how many more vessels is the canal serving?
We are not serving more vessels, we are serving bigger ships with more cargo. The number of ships we are handling is lower, but the amount of cargo more than doubled.
But that could change. The U.S.-China trade war might be the biggest headwind facing the canal, which gets paid based on the number of containers moving through its waterway. Due to tariffs levied on Chinese goods, including furniture, apparel, and toys, shipments have been grounded to a halt. Container traffic to the U.S. could halve in the coming weeks. The U.S. and China are top users of the Panama Canal, with the United States receiving and sending more cargo than the following 6 countries combined. Containers, petroleum, and grain products like corn and soybeans are the main commodities flowing through the waterway. The Panama Canal Authority, the government agency that runs the canal, saw revenues rise 55% since 2019, and profits soared 124% compared to 2019.
Last year, we made about $3.5 billion in net income, out of about $5 billion in total revenue.
About $2.4 billion of that net income went to the Panamanian government. The remainder stayed with the Panama Canal Authority to fund projects. The canal contributes about 7.7% annually to Panama's GDP.
Panama is making roughly $3 billion a year as a consequence of the canal that we paid for and we built them.
American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form.
One of the biggest bone of contentions for President Trump is the pricing of the Panama Canal. He says the United States is being singled out, and that's because the United States is the largest user of the Panama Canal.
Probably 90% of containers, 85% of the containers transiting the Panama Canal northbound are going to the U.S. Similar vessels get similar charges, identical charges. So we do not discriminate by origin destination. We don't discriminate by flag.
Ocean carriers like Maersk, MSC, and Hapag-Lloyd pay the canal fees depending on the size of their ship, which locks they use, and whether they used a reservation system.
So let's talk about the fee structure of the canal. How do you actually structure that out?
There is a fixed charge that relates to which lots do you use.
That works out to roughly $300,000 for the Neo-Panamax locks and $100,000 for the Panamax locks. On top of that, vessels have to pay a toll, as well as additional charges like booking reservations, tenders, tug services, and piloting services.
A 17,000 TEU vessel, like the 7 we transited last year, they pay about $1.3 billion to transit.
A TEU, or 20-foot equivalent unit, is the industry standard to measure cargo capacity for ships and terminals. One 20-foot container can hold about 400 flat-screen TVs.
We charge probably on a 65-screen TV set, $10, if that much. If you take a Lexus coming from Japan to the US, probably it's going to be $75.
In addition to its reservation system, vessels have the option to use an auction system, where ships could jump the line by paying extra fees. In 2024, the canal modified its auction rules. In the second half of 2023, drought caused water levels in Gatun Lake to fall around 8 feet below average. As a result, the Panama Canal Authority restricted the number of vessel crossings. Despite that decrease in vessels, the auction system fueled rates, allowing the authority to make more money than ever before. In 2024, the Panama Canal charged a record $3.9 million for one ship to cross, plus an additional $500,000 in transit fees. At the time, the canal had a backlog of over 100 ships waiting to enter. China's influence over the Panama Canal is in the crosshairs of the Trump administration.
We will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it. China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
5 major ports sit on the canal that Panama leases out to different companies to operate.
The port behind me, as well as all ports in Panama, are owned by the Panamanian government.
2 of them are operated by Panama Ports, a subsidiary of Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison, on the Pacific and Atlantic sides of the waterway. Panama Ports renewed its port contract in 2021 for an additional 25 years. The 3 additional ports are run by companies from the U.S., Singapore, and Taiwan.
There's a lot of controversy right now with Trump saying that China has influence over the Panama Canal Authority as well as the ports. For someone who works here, how do you feel about that, and what is your answer?
Well, I'm sure that that's not the case, and I don't see any influence of Chinese government or any other government dictating what the Panama Canal is going to do. It's mainly Panama's decision on what we want to do.
We do not cut corners in anything that deals with security.
The Panamanians we spoke with agreed.
This is absolutely lie. Chinese, they control the canal. Absolutely silly. No.
That is a question about China and the United States, and Panama is in the middle. We can say and do anything about that.
Detractors argue Beijing could use the Chinese-held ports to position military assets or gather intelligence. China claims it has never interfered in canal operations.
I think the easiest thing to do would be to put some sort of explosive on that would disable the vessel from any further movement in a strategic area of the canal. And when they're going through the locks themselves, that's when there's the greatest vulnerabilities.
Another issue is China's no-bid contract to operate 2 ports, as well as other canal infrastructure projects. A no-bid contract is an agreement between a government agency and a vendor without a formal competitive bidding process.
2 members of my association bid, and won bids for the purchase and operation of those terminal franchise agreements. Those were withdrawn, and the bid was rebid by Panamanian authorities and then closed. And in the closed bid process, the award was given to CK Hutchison.
The Federal Maritime Commission has also received complaints saying some Chinese shipping companies have received reimbursements for canal visits, while American companies did not.
If they're going to give subsidiaries to Chinese vessels or subsidiaries to Chinese ports or other type of things, we have to see what's in the best interest of the U.S. shipper. And if that does become an issue, we do have all options on the table.
But in March 2025, a consortium led by U.S. firm BlackRock said it would buy Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison's ports in Panama, along with dozens of others, in a deal worth nearly $23 billion. That plan has faced setbacks. China sharply criticized the sale in a state-owned newspaper, calling the deal spineless groveling. The transaction was also met by renewed scrutiny after Panamanian officials accused CK Hutchison of misconduct. Officials claimed it owed $300 million and didn't properly renew its 2021 contract. BlackRock and CK Hutchison declined our request for an interview. Chinese efforts to build projects in Panama have picked up in recent years. In 2017, Panama became the first Latin American country to join China's massive global infrastructure project called the Belt and Road Initiative. The China Railway Design Corporation completed a feasibility study for a Panamanian government-proposed high-speed train to the border of Costa Rica and expressed its interest in participating in the project. Other projects include the Amador Cruise Terminal, built by China Harbor Engineering on the Pacific side of the canal, and a roughly $1.4 billion bridge over the Panama Canal is being built by a consortium of Chinese state-controlled firms.
China is building a bridge that goes over the Panama Canal. That gives them the ability, if we were in an economic or, God forbid, a military battle with China, that would give China the ability to shut down transit across the Panama Canal, which would have a massive negative consequence on the United States.
Panama, for its part, has faced accusations of corruption. A 2021 State Department report said Panama faced a serious problem with corruption in its executive, judicial, and legislative branches, as well as its security forces. The country currently ranks 114 out of 180 nations in terms of corruption.
Every single day, I think that Panama over the last 5 years has inched closer and closer to China and away from the United States.
A tenet of the 1977 Handover Treaty says the U.S. can defend the canal if there is a threat to its neutrality. China's foreign direct investment has grown steadily since 2017, but the U.S. still invests roughly 3 times of that, about $3.8 billion annually. The U.S. has made a diplomatic push to reassert itself in Panama. In February, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Panamanian President Molino to make clear the U.S. would take measures to protect its rights under the Canal Treaty. Molino later announced Panama would end its involvement with China's Belt and Road Initiative. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth traveled to Panama too, announcing increased military training between the two countries and a potential deal on allowing U.S. warships to travel through the canal for free. Panama has disputed that claim. At the time of his visit, there were 2 U.S. Navy guided missile cruisers, 4 F-18 fighter jets, and over 1,000 U.S. soldiers training with the Panamanians.
We certainly respect the sovereignty of the Panamanians and the Panama Canal. At the same time, we're working with them to ensure that we take back the canal from malign Chinese influence.
Is this China fear-mongering?
We are very proud of what we do, so we do not allow people to come in and try to tell us what to do.
The Senate also confirmed Kevin Moreno Cabrera to be the U.S. ambassador to Panama. The post was mostly vacant from 2017 to 2022, following Ambassador John Feely's resignation over disagreements with the Trump administration. China's foreign direct investments in Panama during that time grew steadily. But while U.S. diplomatic missions ramp up, The fate of the two ports owned by C.K. Hutchison remains in flux. BlackRock's deal to purchase ports, which was initially expected to be signed by April 2nd, has been delayed. And as part of a separate negotiation, Italian billionaire Gianluigi Aponte, founder of MSC, the world's largest ocean shipping company, is also looking to buy the ports. In April, the International Monetary Fund slashed its forecast for global growth to 2.8% in 2025, down from its January forecast of 3.3% due to the impact of the U.S. tariffs.
There's a sort of growing recognition that perhaps this industry that has not been considered publicly important for a long period of time is increasingly now being looked at as something that if you harmed it or created chaos or challenged it could have huge impacts to everybody in the United States and could result in trillions of dollars of economic loss.
How much of the verbiage that President Trump is saying right now about the Panama Canal is true?
If I put it in percentage, it is not true that we are run by Chinese. It is not true that we differentiate rates. It is not true that 38,000 people die in the construction of the Panama Canal. Everyone that wants to sail sails through the Panama Canal, and we are open to the world. That is the neutrality treaty. We have to remain open. We have to remain efficient. We have to price according to international economic laws. We cannot discriminate.
How many tugboat operators do you have in your fleet?
More than 300 people working on the fleet. Most of them are sons from tugboat captains, and we're proud of them working here on the Panama Canal.